Hello, welcome back to the Factually podcast. I am here with Rita. Rita, say
Hello, I'm Rita.
And me, Susanna. And we talk about anything and everything, ranging from politics, current events, and mainly the pandemic, which is also gonna be the big topic of this episode as well. Today's date is the 22nd of December, 3 days before Christmas, and that means that the pandemic is in full swing. The second wave is in full swing, and I guess we're bracing for a third wave as well.
Absolutely. In more personal recent developments, our school is quite possibly at the center of the third wave in Prague. Susanna has been quite lucky not to get the coronavirus, but I have not. I actually currently do have the coronavirus.
Yeah. So, Rita, if you feel sick or anything during today's recording, you get a COVID pass.
If I don't make much sense, just smile and nod and...
Smile and nod and say, it's okay, I have the virus. Yeah. No, our school has been... it's been really unlucky because we went to school for a couple of weeks at the beginning of the school year, so September. Then we went into online learning middle of October. And we finally went back to school. When was this? Right at the end of November?
Mm-hmm.
And we were in school 2-3 weeks. And during the last week, a teacher caught the virus and kind of went from there. Our local hygiene station then ordered our whole entire year group to go under lockdown for 10 days. So that was from the 10th of December to the 20th. And so it has been kind of a rough ride. A bit of I was going to say bittersweet ending, but it's just bitter. To I guess the first semester. Also a really nice Christmas gift from the school, so thanks. But what can you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if this has taught me anything, it's certainly been a valuable lesson, and it's taught me that really we're the ones responsible for, our own risk management. And I'm not going to name any names or blame anybody, but a lot of the times we feel that because people around us maybe aren't taking it seriously, that we don't have to either. But in the end, the outcomes really depend on you. So for me, personally, I feel that I made a mistake of not telling somebody to keep their mask on when I should have, and I think that's probably how I caught it. So I think it's been a really valuable lesson, because consequences exist no matter what you feel at the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And there's so many things that we can't control in certain situations, but that is not an excuse to completely disregard the situation. A lot of things, for example, we can't control the fact that we basically have to go to school physically, right? But at the end of the day, it is up to us to stay safe, to stay responsible.
Yeah, it's on you, basically, I think what I took away from it, because at the end of the day, there's always going to be situations where people, not just in the pandemic, but in general, where people aren't being careful, where people are taking risks. But at the end of the day, it's always up to you how you respond to those actions. It's in those situations, you do have to kind of take it as being your fault, because you could have easily prevented this. Like, you can't blame other people for existing, in the sense that people are always going to exist and situations are always going to arise that aren't far from ideal, is my takeaway, at least.
100%. And there's a lot of things that you can't, like I said, a lot of things you can't control, and it's not only the environment or the certain people that you meet, but it's also the people that you're with. And in a lot of cases, you're dealing with people, especially at school, especially within family, you're dealing with people with a position of kind of higher authority, where you wouldn't feel the greatest to tell someone, hey, wear your mask around me. And that's understandable, but it's not only kind of your responsibility or to try and be as responsible to not catch the virus, but to also not spread it.
Exactly.
And it's also that kind of notion of pretend that everyone has the virus,
Mm-hmm.
to a point where you, of course, don't get scared and freaked out and you stay at home all the time. But pretend that everyone has the virus, but also pretend that you have the virus too.
Exactly.
That kind of thing. Where, and I'm really guilty of this, and my family in general has been really guilty of this. We've gotten really lax with the virus. It's something that everyone's kind of living with right now. But again, it becoming easier to live with, or us becoming more used to living with it, doesn't take away from the fact that it's still the exact same situation as in April and March. It's still the same. The virus hasn't taken a break. The virus hasn't said, oh, people care about me a little less now. I guess I'm going to be less contagious. No, it's still here. And it's still mutating. Haha, we can talk about that too. And so it's up to us to really make those decisions, to take these precautions, to not meet with people when possible. And
yeah, exactly. And I think another key takeaway, and I'm glad that you touched on this, is that especially for us, as our brains are actually still developing as teenagers, but it does extend to everyone, as we've seen with the pandemic, is the idea that a lot of the times your subconscious regarding risk management is not enough. You can't trust your subconscious feeling about what risks are acceptable to take and which are too much. A lot of the times you actually have to think logically. And for us, this is especially true because, like I've said, our brains, they keep developing until the age of 25 or possibly even longer, as we've seen. And with the pandemic, this affects everyone because everyone's grown lax. Like you've said, we've gotten used to living with this virus. I mean, if you had told me in March that there was a teacher at our school that was sick, I would leave the second I found out. But today I was just like, oh, okay, I took it in stride and I, went back to class. And so, yeah, absolutely just making sure to evaluate situations where there's a possible risk logically and not relying on your subconscious. Another key takeaway for me.
Yeah, that is a really good point.
And if I can, I feel like we've been dancing around this for a little while, but I would also like to talk about my experience with the virus because I am young, I'm not a group that's at risk by any means, but it still sucks. Like, you do not want it. For one, I feel like my lungs have suffered, even though I didn't have a strong cough or anything, and my symptoms were quite mild. The other day we were watching a movie together, virtually, of course, not in person, and I was laughing.
Moving question being Johnny English.
Yeah, and I was laughing a lot more than you, actually, but I was laughing quite a bit. And by the end of the movie, I, stopped laughing, and I realized my cheeks are tingling. Like, the same way that when you sit on your leg for too long, it starts tingling because there's not enough blood in it. My cheeks felt this exact same way, and I realized it's probably because I wasn't breathing enough. And it's never happened to me, I'm 18 years old. It's not supposed to be happening to me, I don't think. So lungs are one thing for sure, and actually I was talking with a person from the hygiene station here in Prague, and they told me I should probably go see a specialist after I recover from the virus. Another thing is loss of taste and smell, and people think this is quite a small thing, which it is, to be fair, but it's still, I don't smell anything at all right now, and it's such a weird adjustment to life. Now it's fine, but when I go back to school, I'm going to have to apply deodorant every day or every hour. I don't know, because I'm paranoid. And now I can't even, smell myself. Or a sense of taste especially. It has absolutely sucked the joy out of eating. I can't comfort eat anymore. I just can't because it's like chewing on a piece of plastic.
Oh, no.
So... Unless I pour, the whole can of maple syrup onto something, doesn't really register as tasting good, so.
Oh, man.
Yeah. You don't want to catch it.
Definitely, no. That does not sound very appealing. Let's just say that. Yeah, and every person who's caught it has had a different experience, of course. Your experience being, I think, on the extreme end in terms of given your age.
Yeah, quite possibly.
A lot of people, or average, I guess. A lot of people are asymptomatic or they have a cough or things like that. But symptoms get worse the older you are. I also had a cousin who had it, and it was pretty serious for him. I'm not really sure to the full extent what his symptoms were. But I know they were telling me he had a very high fever. That's about what I heard. But he's fine now. He's doing great. I think he's okay, but
yeah, definitely. And with younger people as well, there is always a risk. It may be quite small, but another risk that's not individual, but that's more community-based is your family, because you can spread it for several days before you even know that you're contagious. And so what happened for me, for example, is I infected my dad with it, actually, and we are quite concerned because his earlier symptoms are much more serious than mine were. Now they've stabilized and it doesn't appear that they're getting worse, but it's still quite a worry, and I definitely wouldn't wish it upon anyone. Yeah. Also, in your case, you didn't know if you had the virus for a while, right? Because before you got the results of the test done, and you had met with your grandparents, right, during the weekend after school ended, and yeah, go on.
That was kind of that kind of want to talk about that. That was like the moment of clarity, the moment of panic, the moment of realization, and it was not a great feeling. Let me tell you that. It was waiting for those results, reading that email that someone came into contact with someone who was positive at our school, reading your text message that you were positive, knowing that I spent the whole week with you, right, during lunch and everything, then reading that another friend was positive, reading that, I thought about the moment I met my grandparents, like the day before. It was like panic, because it was that moment of like, if I'm positive, what do I say? If I'm positive, what am I gonna tell them? And it was even worse because I read that email that people had to go into quarantine on the day I was with my grandparents. My grandparents were still there, right? And ironically, the reason why they were there was because they needed to go to the hospital in Prague, and because they don't live in Prague, they sometimes stay at our house to go to the hospital. They won't pay for a hotel and stuff, right? But I read that email, I'm like, I'm going into quarantine now. I have to go into quarantine now. So I was just like, grandparents, like, I need to, bye, And it was so bizarre, and it was just like, it was scary because I was like, well, if I am positive and I probably infected them, then that's on me. Again, like, if you act as if you have it, those types of things will happen. And exactly. I'm so glad I wasn't positive. And I was, 70% maybe sure that I was gonna be, Yeah,
it's kind of a miracle, honestly, that you didn't catch it from me.
But also, I feel like our technique worked. Our lunch technique.
Yeah.
Where we sit, how do you call it? Vertically, horizontally to each other?
Yeah, just next to each other instead of facing each other, we sit next to each other so we don't. But it like half works though, because then you like tilt towards the other person to talk to them anyway. But
that's
look,
true. I like to pretend it worked.
Yeah, I mean, low-key if you didn't catch it, Another with me too, my grandparents, not directly, but my dad did go to meet my grandparents during the weekend, where. I don't know if he was positive yet. I don't even know if he was contagious yet. So and it looks like there haven't been any symptoms just yet, but we can't be sure with my grandparents either. Yeah. And they're the most at-risk group. So the key takeaway is, I think everyone kind of assumes that they don't have it and that they're not going to catch it unless maybe you work as a nurse or as a doctor, in which case you're probably a lot more careful. But yeah. For normal people like us, we like to assume that we're okay, We don't like to, in the long term, we don't like to be in like a fight or flight mode, and thinking that you are carrying a disease inside you, that tends to activate it. So we like to think that we're safe. But that's not the right approach, as we've seen. It's really not.
Exactly. It's important to have these kind of wake-up calls because while we're not the group that is directly at risk, but it's our family, like it's our loved ones, and getting these wake up calls, you know, seeing that, oh, I could have infected someone, this could have been bad, I feel like really grounds you. And also realizing that this virus is deadly, like it is deadly, it kills people. It's very grounding, and especially when it happens in family or with friends.
Oh yeah.
And that has happened, you know. There have been people around me who have lost people, and it's to this virus, and it's just like that. This is the kind of stuff I feel like we need to be remembering or reminding ourselves of. And I don't want to make it all doom and gloom, of course. Like, I don't want to be all, the virus is ruining everything, but it's still very, very important to stay aware, I guess, of like your responsibilities and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And on the topic, you kind of brought that up several times, talking about how we should always assume the worst case scenario. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I am quite a fan of the books of somebody named, I believe, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. And he talks a lot about risk management and black swans especially. It's definitely a topic that takes quite a lot of time to talk about, so I'll just touch on it briefly. But I absolutely agree that in this situation, the best thing you can do is assume that you're sick if you're going to a place like to school. If you're going to school where you're constantly being exposed to the virus, or possibly being exposed to the virus, it's so much better to just assume that you're sick. Because then the worst case scenario, if you act as though you're sick, the worst case scenario is that you've wasted some time, or you've spent some time apart from your loved ones. Whereas if you act like you don't have it, the worst case scenario is, like I've done, is that you expose your loved ones and yourself, but mostly your loved ones, to the virus. So, yeah. And so now we've talked about our personal experience with the coronavirus, but let's talk a little bit about the vaccine and the vaccine coming up, and there being some mixed reactions from the public. What do you think?
First question, if the vaccine had become available to you tomorrow, Rita, would you take it?
No, but only because I don't know, but I'm going to be immune now. with some limitations. Obviously that doesn't mean that I can take off my mask and run through the streets, but I don't know personally if I'm going to get the vaccine. I would have to talk with my doctor about it, because I've gone through the coronavirus now, or I'm going to go through it, so I'm going to have immunity most likely. Let's say I had it. Let's suppose I had it, though, because I think that's better. That's what you meant, I think. I think I would, personally. I would see it as getting the flu vaccine. I don't know. What do you think?
I think that I would as well. I would say that it depends on who made it. Like, I want to see how long it took to, like, develop it or everything. But to be honest, I think I'm too lazy to even check that, so I just go for it.
That's a vibe.
I think vaccines obviously have to go through an extensive process to even be available to the public, because of just how, what it is, the nature of a vaccine. I mean, if taking the vaccine, I try and think about it this way. I read this somewhere. And it's pretty simple to think about, but we kind of forget about it. Is that when you're thinking about would I take the vaccine or would I not take the vaccine, all the times it's a very kind of selfish thought where in the future, how am I going to feel? How is this going to affect me? If the vaccine is another preventive measure to stop yourself or from getting the virus, which means stopping yourself from infecting others, potentially infecting loved ones or people who are in the risk group. Thank you. Then, yeah, if again, that thought of if taking this vaccine would mean either not infecting my grandparents or infecting my grandparents, then yeah, of course I would take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I would too, simply for that reason. And I also wanted to say that a lot of people, I think, have some qualms about it because it's been accelerated, because it's not been tested for, a lifetime, somebody's lifetime, or even generations. People are concerned, I've heard about, fertility or long-term effects, like those kind of things. But I think that it's not that different from a flu vaccine. I'm by no means an expert, but I think if you don't mind taking a flu vaccine, which does get changed every year as well, then I don't know. I don't see it as being that different. What do you think?
Yeah. I say good. The faster, the better. I say yes. Because waiting another year for a vaccine, I don't know. It's something of like normalizing the other vaccines, normalizing the flu shot, because it's such a normal thing to do, right? Oh, you're gonna go get a flu shot? Nice. It's just like any other vaccine. If, it depends on the vaccine, but any vaccine I think that is available to the wider public is safe enough. And if in the future there's fertility issues, well,
I also think considering this virus, this vaccine is, becoming available all around the world, and especially the USA. I just can't imagine if, 60 years later we have fertility issues, let's say. I just cannot imagine that the companies developing this would survive, or maybe they would survive, but I imagine they would be buried in lawsuits from people, especially in America. So I think the companies themselves have quite a vested interest in making, the vaccine as safe as possible.
I agree, and I think that if these are the public's main concerns, fertility issues and so on, I think it's also in the companies or whoever is developing these vaccines' best interest to make sure that that doesn't happen, to make sure that there's, the smallest possibility that it could. And I also think that the vaccine is, for now, just another preventive measure. It's not going to stop the virus completely, because it is going to take some time to get enough people vaccinated for herd immunity to actually work.
It's true. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, this kind of leads me on to an interesting topic that I've encountered before, and it's just the question, so to what extent can we trust, or to what, it's quite a TOK question. For those of you who don't know, that means theory of knowledge, because we do the IB diploma. But it's the question of to what extent can we trust our own layman opinions over the opinions of experts. And it's kind of supposing, obviously if you have your uncle Jeff there telling you he can predict 100% what the stock market is going to do, then that that's not a trustworthy opinion. But in less extreme examples, for example, with the vaccine, you have, obviously, I think we both have some doubts about the safety of the vaccine, maybe not as severe doubts as many other people do. For instance, I don't think we're getting microchipped, but it kind of brings about the question, should we trust our own opinions more, or should we trust the opinions of experts? What do you think?
It depends on the person, I think. And depends on whose interest, what's your best interest. If you are more egocentric, you're young and you're healthy, you might not take the vaccine because it wouldn't really affect you. Why would you take it? You don't want to inject something in your body when you don't really need it because you're young and you're not really at risk. But if you have more of a, I guess, empathetic approach to it, and you start thinking about maybe the people close to you or things like that, then your perception could change. And it's difficult with, I don't want to get into conspiracy theories. I don't want to start talking about like big pharma and I don't know. That's a difficult question.
Yeah, same. I mean, the thing is like I've done a bit of reading on that, but then as I was speaking, I kind of forgot what I wanted to say, so I threw the hot potato at you. That's why. But basically, I just think that it's, like you said, it's a very complicated question and it depends wholly on the situation as well. But personally, I think that like you said, it depends on the situation, and you have to kind of judge it by incentives as well. Now that I think about it, it is quite an economics question as well, because you have to ask yourself, I think in a lot of these situations, if they're getting it wrong, then is it, you know, is it still in their best interests to change? And I read that there was a situation with the Bank of Japan where I honestly don't understand enough economics right now to explain it, where basically they had been doing something wrong, if I understood it correctly, and then but simply the incentives weren't really there for them to change it. Again, might have misunderstood the situation, but if we look at the vaccine companies currently, it is quite hard to judge, but you do have all of these medical experts doing their very best to minimize risk to the consumer, especially knowing that it's going to be, released worldwide. It's going to affect millions of people. And if they do have widespread, issues with it, then also that's a huge liability for the company all of a sudden. Obviously there is a lot of gain, and there are many incentives to getting it out as early as possible, absolutely, but there's also quite a risk for just doing a bad job of it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I don't want to get into like theorizing and everything. But of course there was this pressure to get this vaccine out as soon as possible. And that pressure was on every company, on every kind of research facility that started working on a vaccine. And every single person that is working on this vaccine or working on their own vaccine are trying as hard as much as possible to get it out as soon as possible. And I know that there's a lot of vaccines that are already being kind of rolled out to the public. Yeah, so I think that there also is that pressure on these companies to try and churn out a vaccine as soon as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. But if we do consider the trade-off though, because as it is, you do have to expose more people to the vaccine, then, well, actually that's still a good question. Would more people, I suppose if everyone were to get the vaccine, more people would get the vaccine than would catch coronavirus if we didn't have the vaccine. I think that still holds true. But in terms of the long-term tail risk and the long-term, possible side effects, we have things like fertility that's being considered for the vaccine, but also for COVID, because the vaccine at least is something that doctors have been working on to make sure it's safe. COVID, not so much.
Yeah.
And you also have things like, people having... they call it something, I just don't remember, like long haul COVID, I believe. It's just long-term side effects, and if if like a large portion of the population were to get COVID, this would be a huge thing. I think it would,
that is a very good point.
Yeah, the people working in, I don't know, chiropractors' offices and lung specialists, their business would go up by a lot, I think. So
yeah. We can have a conversation all day about the coronavirus and about the vaccine. It really is, and every day there's more information coming out, and it's just it's harder and harder to keep track of everything. Let's just say restrictions. I don't even know half of the restrictions that are happening in our country. I know flights from England have been stopped because apparently there's like a new string or a mutation from England. So some of our classmates are stuck there. But we'll see how the situation evolves.
Yeah, the mutation is very interesting, and they're actually, as far as I know, currently, it's kind of a mysterious thing. Nobody really knows what's going on. People have opinions ranging from, oh, it's not that bad, like it might spread faster, but it might not either, to some people saying it spreads up to 70% faster or easier or something along those lines. So, and some people are also not really sure if the immunity you get from other strains applies to this strain. Right. And there's people saying it probably does, but then there's also some doubt based on some case studies, as far as I'm aware, of just treatment with plasma from those immune that was unsuccessful in people with the new strain, I believe. So it's quite a mystery.
It really is, yeah.
And there's also people that think that, considering how slowly we caught coronavirus initially in, early 2020, it's very likely that the strain has spread all over Europe, and it's just that we've caught it in England due to more specific testing and whatnot. And it's like a last-ditch effort by closing airports and by what is it called? Oh my god. By not allowing flights from the UK. That's kind of a last-ditch effort at containing it. That's probably not going to be successful. In fact, we may be at school. It's quite possible that we do have the new strain.
I'm not an epidemiologist. I'm not an epidemiologist or a doctor or anything. But the fact that we went from maybe a couple of hundred, 200, 300 cases a day in March, April, May, June, to thousands every day, right? In September, October. I was trying to figure it out, right? I was trying to figure out why that would be. Why is the second wave so big? Why there's so many numbers? Is it because there's just more community spread, because the virus just managed to spread to more communities and so it managed to infect more communities? Or is it, like you said, a new strain, like a mutation that just spreads faster now? It's I don't know.
That's a good question. Although as far as I'm aware, the new strain was first documented in September, which I guess would sort of put it at around the timeline of the second wave here. But personally, I would attribute that to just the government opening up schools. I firmly believe that schools are at the source of most, or just the vast majority of new cases, because, children can be asymptomatic carriers,
that's true.
I'm not sure if that's the exact correct terminology, but children don't have to have symptoms, and I think it spreads very fast in schools where there's hundreds of kids locked up in the same classroom or in the same building. Right. Then during lunch times, if you have a cafeteria, everyone takes off their masks in one room, essentially, just to eat. In our case, we don't have a cafeteria per se, but it's still quite a similar situation. And then they might spread it. I think we discussed this as well. They might go home, spread it to their parents, who then take it to their workplace, and it's just this big mess.
Yeah, I agree. I think that children getting no symptoms or lighter symptoms, that it's different to maybe a workplace environment where someone who's older maybe gets more serious symptoms, and obviously they're then prone to get tested or stay at home. But children who are asymptomatic, children who have very light symptoms they're prone to just come back to school.
Exactly.
Why not? To spread it to their parents and their grandparents. And
exactly. Kind of.
Why would they get tested, right, if they don't have any symptoms?
Yeah. Exactly. And for us, it was quite a similar situation, that if we hadn't gotten notified that there was COVID spreading in our school, would I even have gotten tested for my symptoms? I don't know, because they were quite light at first. So, exactly like you said.
Yeah, very interesting. Do you know what else is interesting? The election. Do you like my segue?
Yes, very much. Go on.
Man, what do you think about that?
Um, that was actually a genuine cough. That wasn't like a fake cough. What do I think about the election? Well, I think Trump is definitely going to run again in 2024.
Right.
That's my prediction. In terms of whether I think, well, I do think the number, to be fair, this isn't a very popular opinion as far as I'm aware, but I do think it's a little bit suspicious that the mailed ballots were pretty much only for Biden, something along those lines. I thought, or like 100% of them were in some states. I don't know exactly, but I thought that was a little bit weird, because if it was like 90% for Biden, I would have been like, okay, sure. But I don't, I think making accusations about election fraud is quite drastic, and yeah, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Personally, I didn't hear of that. But I will say that I think that's the best entertainment we've gotten this year. It was great waking up, watching the election, refreshing that webpage. I think that, yeah, like you said, I think Trump will run again in 2024. And the scariest thing is we don't know if he'll win or lose.
Yep.
And then in 2016, everyone was so sure that he would lose. Everyone was so sure that of course he can't win. It will be Hillary Clinton. But I think that a lot of people failed to kind of realize what was kind of slowly simmering, what was going on kind of in the shadows of American society. I think European society in a whole, which is kind of the rising of populism.
Yeah.
I think that, that's a book I'm reading right now, which is about like national populism, by Roger Eatwell and Matthew Goodwin.
Ooh, tell us more about it.
No, the book basically kind of discusses the kind of silent rise of populism in, this is mainly focused on Europe and Brexit, but also Trump, and how no one was really expecting it. And I think that we got a wake-up call in 2016, which is when Brexit happened and when Trump was voted. Like, those are the two defining dates. And I think that no one was expecting either of those things to happen. A lot of people thought that this Brexit referendum was just gonna, everyone will be against leaving, but here we are. And it's...
Yeah, it kind of, not to be too drastic, and I'm saying this more as like a provoking thought than like a genuine opinion, but it does kind of highlight some of the disadvantages of democracy, is what I'm gonna say. Yeah. Because people, in general, it's very good that they get represented, and I absolutely agree. But on the other hand, a lot of the times people aren't known for making the wisest decisions, as we've seen. But to be fair, I can't really think of a better system, So
I agree. I think democracy is not a perfect system like anything else in the world.
Yeah.
Like everything else in the world. I think that a good example of just showing how bad people are at voting for things, or I guess also a sign of kind of populism, was when in the Czech Republic in 2013, I think, it was the first time where people got to directly vote for their president, and it wasn't through representatives and stuff who then voted for the president. And the first time we got the chance to do that, we voted for Miloš Zeman, which is still our current president because he was reelected. And he's very, I think he's a great definition of a populist kind of president. He does things in a very brass kind of, he's got that.
He's our
Trump
very
pizzazz,
own,
I guess.
Yeah, he's our very own knockoff Mr. Donald Trump. But to be honest, To
create the perfect Donald Trump, we have to combine Miloš Zeman, our president, with Andrej Babiš, our prime minister. Because Miloš Zeman has the populism, Andrej Babiš has the money. So together they are an unstoppable force.
That was such a great segue into what I actually wanted to say as well. is that it's interesting how prevalent it is. Our prime minister also is the very definition, I would say, of populism. You know, now our Czech government is sending one singular payment of 5,000 crowns, which is roughly I would say $250 ish, to every retired person in the Republic, and they justify it, I believe, by saying this is your reward for wearing masks. Like,
Nice.
it's actually quite ridiculous in my opinion, because if anyone needs relief, it's the businesses, right? It's not the people. You know, it's the businesses that are suffering as a result of the pandemic, for which, as far as I'm aware, the relief and the stimulus packages have been very hard to get here.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what populists are very good at. It's trying to dig out the hidden desires of a certain a kind of, not, I wouldn't say majority,
maybe a silent majority, something like that.
I guess you could say silent majority. I think that what happened with Donald Trump, I think you can almost kind of defer this from their own kind of slogans. Make America great again. The use of again kind of implies that there was a great America before and that there isn't one now, but you can make it again. With the Brexit kind of big slogan was, let's take back control. It's as if they had control, they lost it, and we got to take it back.
Yeah, you're right that now that you say that, like, combine it, you're right that it does sound like it's an appeal to an older population, one that lived through, you know, the good old times, in quotation marks, rather than younger voters, which makes sense, because, for example, tying it back to the one-time reward for old people here, it's because they're like the target audience of our prime minister. They make up a lot of his voter base, so it's kind of, we see it as like a bribe to vote for him again. So yeah,
definitely, 100%. I will have to ask my grandma about this, because I still don't completely understand why she voted for him, and I would definitely love to know, because she is kind of that target audience, his target audience, and you'd think that there's so many other parties that are just better choices than the prime minister's party, but I guess he makes it very appealing, I guess.
Agreed. Some of the feedback I've heard from my own grandparents is that only one of my grandparents, I believe, voted for him, but is that he speaks like a normal person, which is quite ironic because he's not even Czech. He's
speaks like a normal person, has a very how would you call that? What would you call it? Like a very Slovak, with Slovak roots, Czech with Slovak roots.
True, but it's because he uses, more colloquial language, simple language, quite a bit like Trump, which to me is a very interesting case of politicians becoming more like YouTubers, like the two professions just convalescing. But yeah, I think it's just populism. Yeah, Trump is known for. There was this very interesting video I watched, an analysis on the language he uses being very simple, repetitive. I believe it was about 3rd or 4th grade, don't quote me on this, but 3rd or 4th grade reading level. And I think that's very much mirrored by Andrej Babiš, our prime minister.
That is very true, yeah. A lot of people, I think, don't realize just his influence here, and how much he actually owns, which is sometimes scary to think about. He owns huge media companies here, that my grandparents buy all the time. They're buying their weekly issue of Lidové noviny, And it's not only news networks and sites, but also food, right?
That's so true.
To the point where me and my family downloaded an app that would scan the tags of the food, and that would tell us if it was his or not. It's especially difficult with bread and yogurt. Like there's quite a bit of bread stuff that it's quite a bit of bread that is his, and quite a bit of like yogurt or like dairy products that are his. So
that is so 21st century, scanning your food to make sure it's not like helping the Czech Prime Minister. It's not like funding the Czech Prime Minister. Exactly. I love it. Honestly, it's just there was something I wanted to say and then I forgot. But it is a whole mess.
Yeah, not to mention that he is also he like huge conflicts of interest, and he is being criminally prosecuted, I think. No?
Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, yeah, there's a lot of interesting history behind Andrej Babiš. Not only what's going on now or what happened maybe 10 years ago with his financial scandals and everything like that, taking money from the European Union that was supposed to go to small farming businesses and putting it into his own business.
Yeah.
But also, if we can go back all the way to communism, where there's quite solid evidence that he was cooperating with the secret state police. Mm-hmm. And that is something that was almost given because he did study outside of Czechoslovakia. He studied in kind of a prestigious university, and yeah, it's just all this stuff that, I don't know, makes it quite distasteful to think that he is our prime minister. But another point with populism is that's very interesting is I think that you kind of see that here as well. There's a history of almost kind of distrust with a lot of the politicians here, because it's not only Andrej Babiš that has been kind of caught up in the middle of scandals, but it's also been people, I don't know, like the Liberal Democrats, like ODS, who have been in kind of big scandals. I think in the US it's kind of more profound, where people have kind of maybe even lost trust in presidents that, I don't know how to explain that, but kind of out of touch with the people. So it's almost no wonder that they voted, like you said, with the language. They voted for a president who shares their language or like their passion. He speaks in a very simpleton terms for the simpleton people, you know? And so, yeah, there's still a lot to talk about. There's still so many things going on in this world. I mean, Brexit is like happening right now, right around the corner. And whether it happens now or after the New Year's is, I mean, it's still going to be a hard Brexit no matter what happens. It's looking like a pretty hard Brexit. So, yeah, we'll see that though if it'll happen sooner or later. But if the Christmas of the people who are trying to figure out Brexit is going to be ruined or not, having to work on this on Christmas Day. But yeah,
that's so true.
And also, I mean, the inauguration of Biden, everything like that.
I'm excited to see Trump dragged out of the White House.
I'm excited for him. I'm excited to just see it. I'm excited to see someone. I want him gone. But yeah, there's still so many things going on. Coronavirus, I mean, it's still raging. Still so much to talk about, but we're gonna have to leave that till next time. I guess. Yeah. Well, do you want to say bye?
Okay. Thank you for listening. Bye.